Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Subhash Kari, the Chief Innovation Officer at Infocepts, overseeing our global practices and delivery organization. Infocepts is a US-based global data and AI solutions firm. Our mission is to bridge the gap between the worlds of business and analytics to help organizations make better decisions faster and with more confidence. We have partnered with the Chief Data Officer magazine on a series of interviews to bring pragmatic, evidence based insights to business and technology leadership to advance their insights driven journey. Today, I have with me Ms. Anna Hannem, Vice President, Data and AI Risk at Scotiabank. So coming to the data ethics program, this is again as I mentioned, a fast becoming like a fundamental part of every conversation, right, about data collection and usage. This challenge of how you protect an individual's right to privacy and control over their own data while enabling organizations to use it to provide better experiences to them, right? So can you talk a little bit more about your experiences, in this field and what led to the public recognition for the program?
Certainly. So as you pointed out, data ethics is becoming more and more table stakes in the way we do business. It's not just a side product and nice to have and something that you mention in words and then you don't really do anything about. At Scotia, we have put out public our data ethics principles. We have put those principles into the code of conduct, so for every employee to sign off on. We have a mandatory learning course that was launched as well, so that people are aware of what data ethics is, how does that interplay into their everyday business operations, how they themselves are responsible for usage of data, and what responsibility they have to the customer. As you've pointed out, the customer is really at the center of it all. And what our focus is customer data, so individual customer data. Eventually, we'll segue as well into other uses of data, but the focus primarily is on customer data, because that's what matters. And that's where, we can, if we don't get it right, then there's huge reputational impacts, financial impacts. There's already regulations, as you pointed out as well, that we have to be mindful of and incorporate as well in terms of how we are dealing with our customers' information and why we're dealing with that customer information. What are we doing with it? Being transparent, being respectful, being honest. All of those are part of our guiding principles when it comes to data ethics. But like I mentioned, it's all good and well when you just talk about it, but then what do you do about it? And a big part of why we were successful and received an award for the work that we were doing is because we really focused on communication and change management. And change management meaning instilling data ethics as part of the cultural fabric of Scotiabank. And we did a lot of roadshows. We talked to the highest level of the organization, up to the C-suite, about the program, the progress, etc. We also put in a robust governance process in place that showcased how each player, that meant technology, analytics, business, what the role they played. Many people think that with responsible AI or data ethics, it's a technology problem. And in many organizations, that's where it sits. For us, it's not. It's under the data and analytics function. With that, we have a more wholesome look at what data ethics should be. And so it's not just a technology problem. It's not just an analytics problem. It is everyone to have a responsibility behind that, which includes to the business. And so back to that whole principle of transparency and being able to, being able to talk about customer data and its usage and what we're doing with it, that should be easily conveyable to everybody. Technology, analytics should be able to say that to the business, because at the end, if something where the customer has a question, they're not going to talk to the analytics department. They're not going to talk to technology. They're going to talk to the business. So the business needs to ensure that they understand what's gone into, this product or service that was tailored for this customer, etc. Because really what we're trying to do is more personalized products with the technology we're using. But with it, we have to ensure that we've got transparency as how we got to that result. And so it really is the responsibility of everyone to understand in terms of the role that they play. So back to that cultural aspect, we really spent a lot of time in that area to be able to communicate, like I said, and all the other things that I just mentioned, code of ethics and our ESG report as well, and to be able to keep on conveying that message to the organization. And the more you talked, the more you met one-on-one, we shared with the business what this means to you. How does this particularly pertain to you? What is your role in this? personalized it in that manner as well, the more adoption we got, the more then people were excited about it. They didn't see it as just an administrative task, but really felt value that they were delivering the best product and service for a customer. And then the last piece is technology. In parallel, as we were doing all those activities, we also worked with a consulting company who helped us design a tool that would help in terms of assessing when you have a use case from a data ethics perspective, did it meet all the criteria that we were comfortable with to be able to put that use case out, into the world, and especially if it had impact on the customer publicly, then that was even more where we provided scrutiny. And then, like I mentioned, overlaid on that governance and then the appropriate sort of due diligence so that we were all comfortable with it. And in fact, in our scenario, any of the use cases where we feel that requires, a bit more scrutiny, they go all the way up to our chief compliance officer to sign off on. So it really does have, attention at the highest level in our organization.
Yep, yep. And Anna, I think this journey on this program, just for the viewers, how many months did it take, just so that folks can understand, what does it take to actually make progress in this area?
About 2 years, but the first year was really about setting up the foundation. And then at that point, it was about, having an understanding of what is data ethics, what is the scope of data ethics, who are the involved parties, putting in design. So working with consultants as well in terms of what is done in industry, what are best practices, what are other institutions doing, what are other geographies doing, what are other industries doing, taking those learnings and best practices and then designing our program. As you can imagine, that initial stage always takes the longest. Then the second year was about execution, but you need to have strong execution, one, practice on your team, but also to be able to deliver. It's one thing to have a strategy, but it's another thing to actually then execute on that strategy. And like I mentioned, a core component of that was the change management piece. You will not make a difference in an organization and make it as part of adopted unless you really have a strength in that. And that includes a lot of communication, a lot of, like I mentioned, road shows, education, training, etc. A lot of time is spent on that. And that's sometimes where people underestimate the effort that it takes on that, because sometimes it's not easily tangible, and it doesn't easily, you don't see a result right away, but it's the long-term results that then really pays off. And then we definitely saw that in the way that our tools and processes were adopted, in the way that we were able to work with partners in the organization to have them implement the work that is being done from a data ethics perspective.
Yeah. It's very fascinating. I think there are a lot of takeaways for me, so thank you for sharing that, the journey. As you mentioned, you have sort of been given additional response trees or different response trees now in your new role. You sort of shared the importance of customer trust and building an improved customer experience in the bank, right? So can you tell us, I think, how you are bringing your exposure in data ethics in your new role as the Vice President of Data and AI Risk, and sort of further the thinking about oversight around innovation in the data space?
Most definitely. So as you pointed out, customer trust is our very reason for existence. It is what is our most valuable asset. And so without it, unlike with other organizations, if a customer doesn't trust you, they may drop you, but then eventually may come back. With a financial institution, if they don't trust you, there is no going back. Most of the time that relationship is severed and you cannot undo it. And so we really have to be mindful and protective of that relationship. And data ethics is a great way of showcasing, one, to our customer, two, to our organization, that we take that trust seriously and that we're doing things around it to proactively protect it, not just reactively protect it. That is not the ideal state that we want to be in, right? We want to be proactive in that space. And that is also where AI risk and data risk, my new function, comes into place. It's about looking at the protocols and standards and policies at the cross organizational level that we have in terms of how we use customer data, which in that also data management and governance things come into place, right? Quality of data, the lineage of data, us being able from a privacy perspective as well to understand what is PII, what is sensitive data, how it flows through the organization, where it ends up, how long we retain it, etc. So there's many components to it, many areas of the organization that are impacted by it or impacted as well. And so my team's role now is to look at it from that risk perspective. Do we have the proper controls and mitigations in line? Working with our first line partners to ensure that they do, and then showcasing metrics, from an organization level in terms of how we're doing in that space. The other component of that is the AI space, which is to your point where a lot more innovation is coming to that forefront. We all have heard, recently in the news, some advancements when it comes to AI and the potential that it has in terms of the way we do business, the way we live life. Some people are saying it's, as impactful as when the World Wide Web came into existence. And so this is really a huge thing that we can't ignore. But also it's happening in such a speed that we don't necessarily have all of the policies and frameworks in place. Some jurisdictions do, or are trying to get there, but we don't really yet fully understand the full scope of this and the impact of this. And so you're trying to do design of what should be the safe guardrails, so to speak, and around this new technology so that it doesn't get used for the evil that we've all heard about, but instead is used for the good that we all want it to be used for, and to help us with automation, to help us with productivity, to help us with work-life balance. And while at the same time, like I mentioned, working within our risk appetite and our parameters. And back to also our customer, ensuring that when we're using that, it doesn't do any harm to our customer, because we know with AI specifically, it feeds off of data, but we know also that data tends to have a lot of bias from it in it. And so it needs to be taught to some degree how to look at proper data so that it doesn't have that bias. And so we have to be mindful of that and not just take things at face value, because we may think that we're getting a better result, but in fact, because of what that tool was fed, and like I said, the tool itself is not by any means evil, it's what it's being fed, that we may come up with something that we didn't anticipate, unintended harm. And so we just have to ensure that we're doing our due checks and balances around that as well. So it's a balancing line between innovation and then as well as the guardrails to ensure that we are doing our due diligence around it. Again, back to, from a financial institution's perspective, to protect our customer, to protect our business as well.
Awesome thought to end, Anna. Thank you for joining me today. Please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Subhash.